Brilliant. So this is exciting. Gemini Call Live. Thanks for joining us, those online who've joined us back after lunch. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the Gemini Call in general, it's a weekly stand-up we've been running at the Digital Twin Hub for probably about 4 years or so now. And every week, for about half an hour, always 10:30 till 11, we bring together people from across the digital twin community to share insights from members of the digital twin community through various presentations. Now, we're going to do exactly the same thing today, where we're going to have a variety of speakers in 2 sessions, this one, and then we're going to have a 5-minute break and have another session that will come on stage and give you an 8-minute presentation around their topic. And if you have any questions for our speakers as we go through, please do ask them via Slido. The link is the same as you're using before. Go to slido.com and type in the code CDT Summit, and you'll see there's 3 streams. We are in stream 1, so make sure you ask your questions for stream 1, otherwise we won't ask them. And also members of the audience and those online, please go to Slido and like and thumbs up questions, as that's the order of priority we'll be asking when we get to them. So I'm going to hand over to each of our speakers in turn. They're going to come up, they're going to give a brief introduction to themselves, they're going to avoid using acronyms and sales pitches, and we're going to go through our presentation from there. So our first speaker, if I could please, is Harry from DNV, who's going to be talking about the importance of making your energy sector digital twin a real asset. Over to you, please.
Thanks, Simon, for that introduction, and good afternoon to you all. My name is Harry Vamadeva, and I'm the Regional Director of Energy Systems for DNV in UK and Ireland. And I have to start with a confession. DNV does not build or deliver any digital twins. DNV's in the trust business, providing independent assurance and risk management across many sectors: shipping, energy, supply chains, food, health, just to mention a few. We do offer software, cybersecurity, and other digital solutions. You may have seen the recent acquisition of a Finnish cybersecurity company called CACI. How do we provide that trust? Well, it's not always by knowing the right answers. It's more importantly about asking the right question in the right framework. Is it safe? Will it work? Is it sustainable? Does it comply? Do you understand the risk picture? Our digital twin story started with a dialogue with Technip FMC in 2020. They were increasingly being asked to deliver a digital replica of the hardware they provide. Technip FMC had good quality processors for hardware, good software processors, but digital twins were a blend of the two, and they felt that could be a missing link and a potential liability. What if the digital twin gave incorrect information? Would there be a warranty claim? DNV and Technip FMC ran a series of sprints to develop a methodology for the assurance of the digital twin. The methodology was refined in a series of workshops with Aker BP, which was the main end customer, and then subject to a global industry-wide hearing process before officially being launched as a recommended practice in Q1 2021. So, from asking questions with customers and subject matter experts, to developing methodologies in an assurance risk framework, to stakeholder consultation, to a recommended practice for managing a specific risk. That's how DNV builds trust. I'd like to share with you 7 of the learnings that we have had from working with major energy operators, platform providers, tech suppliers, and consulting firms over the last 2 years since we launched that recommended practice. The first is complementary source of information, not the single point of truth. DNV's experience is that current digital twins are primarily used as a complementary source of information supporting a decision-making process, rather than being the sole source of information. Using digital twins in a more advanced, autonomous use case will require a more stringent approach to data quality, algorithm performance, and software coding, in line with industrial control and automation system management. The second is machine learning. Without question, machine learning has huge potential to improve efficiency. Yeah? It's early days, and significant efforts are needed to scale up the activity. Of all the machine learning initiatives we've seen, only about 10% have really been implemented at scale. Most were conceptual or lots of pilots running in the background. The third is condition-based monitoring, CBM. The holy grail of condition-based monitoring is to predict a failure before it happens and take remedial actions, preventing an unexpected shutdown of the plant and saving huge amounts of money. Currently, only 30% of all maintenance on all energy plants are condition-based. By using sensors, models, statistical data in combination and applying machine learning, we should be able to double that from 30% to 60% condition-based monitoring, thereby reducing cost. Number 4 is the one that's already been touched upon this morning. Data will be used in new ways. Data will be consumed from a multiple of different sources with different requirements to quality of data, like timeliness, accuracy, completeness. When merging data from these different sources, one has to ensure that the overall quality of the data is suitable for the new application or use case. Our recommendation is that requirements to data quality are clearly defined and addressed when specifying the different use cases and functions of a digital twin, recognizing that the data will be consumed coming from different sources with different intended uses. 5, and this really applies to one of the questions that came this morning, is you need to integrate digital twins with your work processes. From our own observations and in dialogue with other organizations, we see that keeping a digital twin valid over time is a challenge. Often development and application digital twins are initiated by an enthusiastic team with a passion and an interest in new solutions. I suspect most of you in the room and online fall into that category. Yeah? However, unless the digital twin is identified and managed as a key system, and the boring stuff integrated into work processes, subject to a management of change process, continually updated to represent the physical asset, then the digital twin falls out of use within 2 years. Number 6 has already come up, regulation. The European Union is working on a new regulation related to artificial intelligence. The most likely it will have an impact on digital twins in the energy sector. The new regulations focus on critical infrastructure. They're expected to come into force in 2023 with a grace period to 2025. Given the very broad definition that the EU has taken in AI and the definition of management and operation of critical infrastructure as a high-risk application, DNV's reflection is that many of the digital twins used in the energy sector will have to comply with the EU AI Act. 7th, and definitely not 7th heaven, is cybersecurity. And I'm surprised it hadn't come up in any of the questions this morning. Energy is one of the top 3 industries that is attacked and hacked on a regular basis. You'll find almost every week an example. Yeah? And it has specific challenges because it's used to operational technologies. The computing and communication systems that are used to manage and monitor, control industrial operations. So OT systems are used to being in silos, so they haven't been a priority for cyber protection. DNV estimates a gulf in maturity between OT and IT of almost 15 years. So there's a huge gap we need to catch up on if we're going to be deploying digital twins in the energy sector on critical infrastructure. Now, I'm running out of time, so I'm going to jump all the way ahead to my conclusion. I hope you can see that it's by combining technical knowledge with deep digital insights that you build trust. But it's really important to remember a digital twin is not a destination in its own right, and that came up this morning. The digital twin is a means to an end to drive complex transformations. And that's the main difference with today's digital twins. It's their complexity, and that's why managing risk becomes really important. At DNV, we believe that the digital twin will be critical to facilitating the greatest transformation of them all, and that is the energy transition. Decarbonizing the energy system whilst providing cybersecurity and energy security. But just remember to ask the right question in the right framework. Thank you.
Brilliant start, and love that. Journey, not a destination. That is digital twins all over. So I'm going to invite our next speaker up in a second, but before I do, encourage you to go to slido.com and type in this hashtag here, and then go to stream 1 and start asking our speakers questions. That's for you in the room and also for you online as well, if you could please. We won't be taking any questions via mics. Everything is done via Slido and that hashtag. So I'll give you a second to get your phones out, slido.com, type in the hashtag, there you go, excellent. As you do that, I'm going to invite our next speaker, if I could please, Lee from CACI, who's going to be presenting on Defence Fuels Digital Twins, a proof of concept for defence fuel enterprise.
Great. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming. Really excited to be here today and to talk to you about the Defence Fuels Digital Twin. So I'm going to start with a little bit of a disclaimer. This project we worked on was with the Ministry of Defence and Strategic Command, so some information may be redacted and things like that, but happy to answer any questions. Come by our booth and we might be able to divulge a little bit more. But thanks. All right, so a little bit about us. I know we're not supposed to make a sales pitch, according to Simon, but I'll do a little bit here. So we're the Information Intelligence Group. So we're part of a larger company called CACI. We do software development consultancy across defence, government, national security, and critical national infrastructure. But today I wanted to talk to you about a product that we actually built called Mood, which is a meta modeling tool to creating digital twins, enterprise architecture, business change processing, and data visualization. So what is this project all about? So Defence Fuels Enterprise was managing the fuel movement and capacity and supply of aviation fuel across a military operating environment. And they came to us and, a part of their Royal Navy air stations, bases and units, and wanted us to sort of build a digital twin around their, fuel movements across all the different bases that they had. So a bit of a high-level description of what that meant. So the first thing we had to do is kind of model the components and the attributes and the interactions of that system. We then paired that with our digital twin Mood software and leveraged some cloud technologies like EC2 and RDS. And then on top of that, then we built some sort of machine learning models, reinforcement learning, things like that with AWS Lambdas, things like TensorFlow. And then we basically brought all that information together and to visualize it, to be able to provide operational support and decision making for the MOD. So there were 3 use cases. So the first was kind of understanding what's happening. Let's have a look at our as-is situation within those bases. So key roles at a fuel station needed access to sort of timely and insightful information about the process at play, ordering, receiving fuel before issuing it to platforms, monitoring and decision processes. I won't go through the outcome of that. Then they needed to predict the near, so that was the as-is situation. Where do we stand right now? Let's model all that out. And then we wanted to predict the near future. So more objective and understandable information on the day-to-day operations, the kind of fuel movement between vehicles and things like that. And it could answer questions that, if demand doubles, does that necessitate demand in, doubling the refueling vehicles? If fewer aircraft or more aircraft come, how does that affect the demand for fuel? And then thirdly, it was kind of testing further reach and change. So this is where the kind of machine learning came into it, and what would happen if we wanted to use alternative fuel supplies, what if there were different policies and procedures around fuel movements, and what if we reconfigured a base? What if, hydrants were taken down, Bowsers weren't available? How does that look, and how can we optimize that in the future? So how did we go about doing this? So we started off with a discovery phase, and we basically took the raw data that they had, and that consisted of sort of like masses and masses of rows of data within an Excel sheet with all classified information about fuel transactions and movements. And then we broke that down into its component parts. So we got things like platforms, which is the aircraft types, the tail numbers. Then we have things like the fuel, so there's different types of fuel. In the aviation industry, you have jet fuel, you have VAV gas, there are other types as well. Each of those fuel things have capacities and quantities, and they have a grade. And then the other part of the component was the storage. So we have things like refueling vehicles, Bowsers, hydrants, tankers, and then bulk fuel installations. So these are the ones that store all the fuels at all the bases. And then we brought all that together then, to describe the supply and movement of that. How did that fuel move between all these different components? So that's when we, using our mood software, we built the meta model, which was all those things I just described, the components, and then how those interacted and kind of aligned with each other. So centrally you have the fuel movement, that's the thing we want to talk about. And then these are how the component parts interact with each other. So fuel demand contributes to fuel movement. Fuel demand comes from a platform, it has capacity and so on. So we kind of architected that out with our software. And then what were we able to do with that? The solution was, so this front end, these slides are a bit old, but essentially we took the structural models, we built a data pipeline around it that took data from sensors and business systems and collated all that together, and then we fed that into a front end visual display that the base operators could use to answer certain questions. If I go, stay on this slide a minute. So I know that's not the best of pictures, but like in the top left corner there, you have things like instantaneous fuel demand. So you can kind of see, right, how much fuel consumption am I doing daily? So you can answer those questions. There's another box there somewhere with the resilience. So how long is my fuel going to last? Is it going to last a week? Is it going to last 2 weeks? And things like that. And I must say, this was built with a user-centric design principle, so it wasn't something that we came up with. We worked with the MOD and Strategic Command to build the somewhat best user interface we could, to answer the questions they wanted. I should state this is a proof of concept. This isn't a finished product. I think we did it over, just a couple of months, so it was really, rapid application development, really. And then the other thing we did then was build these predictive models. So that's the sort of machine learning piece that came into it, so that we could have a sort of a timely, what are our fuel movements going to look like stretched out over a long period of time. And we use reinforcement learning for that, so we gave it some models and said, this was the data that we had on the fuel, we run it through this thing, and this is the outcome we want you to have. And that built the system up then to be able to, when you put live data in it, to be able to answer those questions about the future. And just looking at the time. So the results. So it was a success. It had quite many achievements. So we actually proved that we could build a digital twin, and in the simplest form possible. We didn't over-engineer this. This was a straightforward sort of solution. We used cloud technologies, so we were able to take our software and implement it with cloud technologies, implement it with the business processes and data formats and things that were within the MOD. And ultimately, it was quite a low-cost front end to it. And then the future roadmap, these are the things that, taking this proof of concept, if we could build it further, what could we do with our mood software? Well, we could extend it to more units and bases, so that, this one was built on one Royal Navy airbase, but we, imagine extending that out and, being able to manage the whole fuel movement across all the other bases. And I think a really important thing that, a digital twins offer or should offer, and I think it's like a real big strong pillar of it, is the integration with other systems. So a digital twin can answer one small thing, but when you've got digital twins working with other digital twins, I think that's when we'll see the power of these things coming together. So if we would integrate with workflow management, scheduling, ordering, processing, you can imagine automating a lot of that decision making. We'd be looking at modeling of electric aviation, and there's some training aircraft now which use hydrogen. So, it's a very easy way when you've got a digital twin to add another component to it and see what the long-reaching change would be. The consideration of fuel degradation, different fuels, and then important one towards the end there is net zero. So, we could use this to measure and meet sustainability targets, which is a big thing that everybody's talking about at the moment. And using digital twins, we could answer that question. We could, make sure that, the MOD is funded by the public purse. We could save money by using this type of software to reduce carbon and emissions and things like that. Spot on. 8 minutes. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Some absolute excellent timekeeping. For those who watch the Gemini Call live, oh, there's my timer saying stop talking. Look at that. those who watch the Gemini Call, when we do it on a weekly basis, we have no way of actually controlling if the people go over, apart from just trying to rudely interrupt and say, okay, you've had enough time. So thank you to our speakers for looking after the clock here. I'm going to introduce our next speaker, if I could please, Paul from OnePlan, who's going to be presenting on how digital twins are making the biggest contribution to reducing the environmental impact of major events. And whilst Paul comes to the stage, I'm going to encourage you all to please go onto Slido, type in this hashtag here, CDT Summit, choose Stream 1 and ask some questions. We've had about 10 questions so far, which is great, and we'll be asking all of our questions at the end of the agenda to all our panellists. Over to you, please, Paul.
Sports events and venues worldwide are quite known for greenwashing, and what I'm going to talk to you today is some of the work we're doing with the Paris Olympic Games in terms of how they're using digital twinning to reduce the carbon footprint of the Games. And we never set out to kind of be a digital twin kind of company and do digital twinning stuff. If you go back 2 years, we were a metaverse company, but metaverse is no longer cool. So we now call ourselves kind of digital twinning. We've been using over 110 countries now to plan venues and operations. About 30,000 different venues have used our platform. But I think one of the key things I want to kind of come out of this is actually we didn't start off with digital twin, we started off with a problem. And what is the problem? So I've worked now on 6 Olympic and Paralympic Games. Olympic Games are planned in 2 systems, PowerPoint and Excel. What I'm specifically talking about is around all the temporary overlay, the tents, the cabins, the barriers, the human resources. People will cut and paste from Google Maps or from the AutoCAD. They'll slot it into PowerPoint because it's on their machine, and then they do all their own planning. And it's obvious what some of the issues are with that. Plans are disconnected from each other, and there's no security around it, and it's separate to that Excel spreadsheet of the shopping list you need of everything. And obviously things are moving really, really quickly. Right now today, every Monday morning, between 80 and 120 people start working in the Paris organising committee. Just think of that in your own organisation if you were ramping up every week like that. And then in September 2024, bang, they all disappear. So just think about kind of the mindset and how that works. 94 kind of functional areas. So the integration of lots of data is very, very difficult. The picture you see over there, that is actually human resource planning of a recent Olympic Games. So roll out a big kind of printout of the CAD, and yes, that is sticky little dots going onto a piece of paper. And if you need to move one, then someone's frantically scratching away at the bit of the dot and then moving it around. And then the guy in the middle, Dave, I don't know if his name's Dave, but let's assume it's that, he rolls it up, he walks out, and no one else has a clue what's going on other than Dave, who's got that plan in his bedroom somewhere. So that's what we're trying to kind of get away from. So we're 2 systems which are interconnected, the GIS mapping system, so every item of overlay is planned in the platform, every sign, every security camera, every human resource. And then we also turn that into 3D as well. The use cases for 3D are slightly different to 2D, things like broadcast camera positions. So what they're doing is using it to plan where every single broadcast camera goes, and we simulate the broadcast camera capability, how far it can pan, how far it can zoom, its full capability. That whole team is based in Madrid, and they're doing all their planning from there. So yeah, you can see there where we're reducing down kind of the need for the flights and such like. Okay, opening ceremony will be a spectacular opening ceremony, the first ever opening ceremony not to be in a stadium. It's going to be along the river, 650,000 people. Okay, so going into Paris itself, so here's kind of an example of one of the models. This is Place de la Concorde. If you go there today, it's very, very busy with traffic. Being France, there's probably a protest going on about something. And what we do is use photogrammetry technique to build out the kind of environment. Then we take the AutoCAD or Revits from the client, and then we drop those in on top. And you can see there where we can simulate the sun's position accurately by minute. So you can select July 2024, see where the sun's position is. A lot of the sports in this arena are the urban sports, so breakdancing, first time ever in the Olympic Games, there's BMX, there's skateboarding, and a lot of that's late evening, so the sun's coming down, the broadcasters need to see in terms of lens flare and reflections off surfaces, so really, really good for them as well. So all that overlay is then kind of planned in the platform. Okay. Okay, so one of the things we really wanted to achieve is to enable all the National Olympic Committees, 204 of them, and the Paralympic Committees to get access to these 3D models all over the world. So the athletes can actually experience the venues without having to fly to Paris. They do lots and lots of site visits. Now, if you think of the Australian Olympic Committee, there's them at the top, then there's the Australian Cycling Authority, then there's also the swimming and the various different sports below that. There's lots and lots of flights, and then there's all the suppliers who go there as well. So the digital twinning, we kind of stream this service into kind of any laptop, kind of anywhere. You have to have fairly decent kind of Wi-Fi for it. But the question we always got asked, yeah, the Aussies can afford it, the Brits can afford it, the Americans can afford it, that's kind of great, but can Eritrea use it? Can they get access to it, and is it going to be fair and equitable for them? So what we did, we actually worked on a version of our system, which is essentially like Google Street View. So rather than doing all the simulations, because they don't need to see that, they just want to know where they're going to get off the bus, where they go to the change rooms, where the field of play is, where the media mix zone is, where they'll do the anti-doping, and where they go back again. So we essentially do Google Street View in these models, and it means that it's you don't need like lots of Wi-Fi. It can run on a mobile phone in 3G. So very much making the digital twin specific to each individual use case and the end user. So kind of as of last week, we get high volumes of stuff here. It's 37 competition venues. It's 100 non-competition venues. It's 94 functional areas. So at the moment we have over 600 people using the digital twin. That's increasing by about 50 a week, multiple venues, lots of stuff planned on there. So we get a lot of integration of things. One of the big challenges is data integrity for us and maintaining that. So what you can't do is just give open, free access to everything. It'd be carnage. So what we do, according to your role and the venue you're working at and your functional area, that then gives you the permissions about what you can do, what you can see as well. So our various layers. That was probably the most complex bit, but the most important bit. And that really drives the adoption. So it's one thing building these great things, but how is it used? So we really, really focus on kind of user adoption and making sure that's impactful. Okay, so what's the impact of it? On the profiles we've done with the IOC and also with Paris 2024, there's a saving of over 120,000 tonnes of carbon. So we've worked with a lot of the Olympic committees and suppliers, like how often do you fly? How many are you now going to cut down by? One of the big advantages for them is they go there today, it's not like it looks during the games. So they're actually getting to see exactly what it looked like during the games. And moving forward to LA, we're expecting to have a kind of cost saving of almost 400 million, so pretty kind of significant. With these models, one of the big challenges is around IP and data image rights, which is quite challenging. Actually, who owns this? Remember, the organising committee for the Olympic Games is just an event organiser. They own no venues. So what we've done is a lot of work with them to look at kind of legacy. So can Roland Garros, Stade de France, how will they utilise it kind of going forward, and who owns the image rights around that? There's an interesting kind of fact on the Eiffel Tower. We can actually use it and show it during the day, but we're not allowed to show it at night because it breaks the French image rights law for the Eiffel Tower. So it's quite specific by country as well. So working closely with the IOC in terms of what's the kind of longer benefit. Obviously, the further out you do this, the more longer term benefits there are. So we're already talking to Brisbane, who have the games in 2032, about planning around the city, the airport, they're upgrading, and some of the stadiums. But you can see there, we're just trying to kind of map out exactly where we could be. With Paris, we kind of started with 2 years to go, so we're kind of limiting down some of the benefits. Another great project we're involved in, this is the new home of the LA Clippers, the Intuit Dome. A great project because the owner is Steve Ballmer, the former CEO of Microsoft. So he sat at home and made design decisions about this venue based on the digital twin. They're now selling the hospitality spaces and all the advertising spaces, and they want to put this in Fortnite. So now using digital twins for a commercial purpose, they intend to make more revenue from the digital asset than the physical one because there's no limitations around it. So what we're seeing is a real drive towards the commercialization, and that's where you really get into IP and you get into image rights. How can I use this? How can I manage this? And what we'll find with a lot of the computer games in the future, these teams will say, hang on, if you want something that looks similar to my venue in your computer game, the FIFA games and the NBA games, they're going to have to kind of pay for it as well. Okay, I'm just about on time there. Yeah, another example, this is quite an interesting kind of use case at that venue. You come up the escalators, everybody goes up these escalators to get into venue, to right, to go out onto concourse area, left into the arena, then straight ahead for food. But what they realise by going through this is actually everyone is going to stop at this point here to make a decision. So then simulating what it would look like with some of the wayfinding and signage. So they're identifying those issues now before the building opens. And that's me. Thank you very much for listening.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Paul. So we're going to have one more presentation, and then we're going to go into questions to all our speakers. So again, slido.com, type in this code CDT Summit, and you can go to session 1, and you can thumbs up or like questions that have been asked by others, or put your own questions. So next, I'd like to introduce Sophie, please, from IOTICS, who's going to be talking about delivering change sustainably and profitably. Sophie, over to you.
Hello everybody, yes, I'm Sophie Peachey from IOTICS, and we are chuffed to bits to be invited here today. Thank you very much for having us. Wanted to talk about sustainability and profitability around delivering change using connected digital twins. So first of all, I wanted to talk about something that we have achieved with Portsmouth International Port at a consortium there. So as you all know, or you may know, Portsmouth obviously is a commercial port. The majority of the UK's bananas arrive via Portsmouth, in case you didn't know. So supporting a vast number of jobs, and has got a really important ambition of trying to achieve net zero carbon by 2030. So a really aggressive target there. Part of that target is based not just on the interest in achieving net zero, but also because alongside that, of course, you can improve air quality. And Portsmouth International Port being municipally owned, it works for the people of Portsmouth. So the people of Portsmouth's agenda, that's what's important to them, and delivering good air quality, that's what's important to the people of Portsmouth. So with a consortium, what was first looked at, and this was delivered last year, was if we're going to achieve net zero by 2030, we have to start somewhere. 2030 is tomorrow. So how can we learn quickly and find out what it's going to take to achieve this? So the first point they looked at was hydrogen. What about the adoption of hydrogen produced at the port? Is this going to be the answer to the question of how we achieve this? So the consortium that came together was effectively a brand new supply chain. Now, how do you start working across a brand new supply chain where you've got brand new demand from a hybrid boat that was being built by Cox's Powertrain? You've got hydrogen itself being made by Engas, producing the electrolyser, all based at the port. And how do we get that common thread across of understanding if we're achieving what we need to achieve? Because for those who are actually stumping up the cash to do this and make this change, they need to be able to see the impact. We need to be able to understand what that is. So by pulling together an ecosystem of digital twins across this network, and the way we represent this high-level architecture that uses IOTICS product, is that the circles there, the larger circles, are everybody gets their own piece of the product, their own place to create virtualized versions, digital twins of their own assets. And that means that they've got complete control over what they share with whom. They are using metadata, semantic metadata to describe their assets, and therefore they can advertise the kind of data that they've got available through the metadata so that other people can ask and have a brokered access as to whether they can use that data. So the first project looked at 3 specific use cases because with a connected approach like this across a federated architecture, we can look at multiple things at once. This is not a single purpose twin, this is multiple use. So we can look at the commercial, the financial, how does it actually stack up to use hydrogen? The logistics, what's it going to look like at an existing busy port to have hydrogen refuelling based at the port, and the environmental impact. Oh, lost my screen. Is that going to come back? Oh, there we go. Interesting case in point, Engas. This was a brand new way to make hydrogen inside effectively a cargo container. Very, very protective of their IP, didn't really want to share anything with anybody. But in order to understand that logistics use case, it was quite useful to know, was hydrogen available? So out of all the data points they could have shared, Engas said, okay, we agree, we will just share, is it on or off? So that was all they shared out of everything they could have shared. And that did enable us then to understand, could the storage tanks be refilled, and therefore could the boat be refueled? So that ability to remain in control, be really granular about what you've got. You'll also see that we've got a dashboard at the bottom there, and that the dashboard is actually represented as a digital twin. So we've got that symmetry within the solution. Anybody can use any consumer they like to consume the data, as long as they've got the permission of the data owner. And so you've got that symmetry of virtualized version talking to virtualized version to add to the security of that. We've also got, on the far side there, University of Portsmouth was actually doing analytics over time. So they were storing data. They were looking at the environmental impact over time. But that database is sitting outside of the solution and is represented in the solution, and there's agreement from the parties about what data can be stored and looked at over time. What we learned very quickly, actually, was that having hydrogen produced at the port side is not the way to go. For various reasons, including financial, we learned within 7 months, we had people sharing data within the first quarter, within 7 months, this is not the way to go. Hydrogen might be part of the future, but not produced shoreside. So what we're able to do now is to take the existing ecosystem that you just saw and look at what next. So we're now looking at shore power. Portsmouth has already secured investment to put in shore power at the port. What that means for those of you that don't know is that when a ship comes and berths, it's effectively like, caravan hookup. So let's get power. They can turn off their diesel engines and just maintain the systems on the ship, on the vessel, by plugging in effect. Obviously, therefore, protecting Portsmouth about getting diesel fumes into the city. So, agreement to put in shore power. How do we start to explore really those same kind of parameters? I'm running out of time, so I will shoot on. So what we're flipping that same ecosystem and just bolting in new pieces. So new partners being brought in, including the ferry company, which is switching to hybrid engines, and other partners to understand the shore power and the electric microgrid management. Other pieces that are coming in the future, we're also working with the Northern Gas Networks around a customer energy village. So this is looking at the what-if situation, but using real data. So this is an actual housing stock that's being built. And another initiative that's actually looking genuinely at that what-if scenario. So hopefully this is something that comes up within the Gemini Call soon, with part of the Hydrogen Initiative, Innovation Initiative team presenting. So looking at, let's understand the supply and demand for hydrogen before we even get there. Just to say that there is a podcast by Ellie Howe at Portsmouth International Port talking about that first and second project, if anybody's interested. IOTICS is here on the booth downstairs, and we've got a presence online, so do please ask us any questions. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you, Sophie. So if I can ask all of our speakers to come up and grab a seat, please. We're hopefully going to flip the background to Slido in a second. And we will go through a couple of our questions in order of which they are most liked. So our first question, if we could please, is Lee for yourself. It says, for Lee, are defence digital twins going to be used in the field, or are they just for infrastructure services?
Good question, and the answer to that is that it is already being used in the field. So yeah, we've this one I showed up here is a proof of concept, but the actual software that we've got has actually produced some solutions that are happening in the battlefield. Yeah.
Very good. One to all of our speakers, if I could please, is what are the biggest challenges that you faced when getting traction with your digital twins? If anyone would like to answer that first.
Maybe I'll take that one.
Please.
I think the biggest challenge is not to deviate from the problem you are solving. Yeah, there's so much passion and so many ideas and a desire to share data that you can get quite carried away with what you're trying to do with the digital twin, forgetting what the outcome is. Yeah, and the use case and the problem definition, and then progressing quite carefully through the data quality, the platform, how much data you're overlaying, so that you can come up with the outcome that justifies the financial investment. One of the main reasons digital twins become obsolete after 2 years is they're not delivering on the problem they were originally, the use case was based on. And that's part of the difficulty of having a lot of pilots, that the scalability is being lost in amongst all the different pilots that are going on.
Lee, anything from you?
I think I totally agree with that answer there, but I think another challenge is perhaps data integrity and interoperability. Like when you've got data from multiple sources and you want to integrate those together, that you might have to put a middle layer in there to kind of normalize that data.
Yeah, I'd agree with those kind of comments on data integrity, and then kind of for us it's like adoption. The great thing about a lot of our projects is there's a real time pressure. We have to get adoption. So as much of our team, are supporting adoption as actually kind of building this great thing that we've got. So it's around training and what hardware are people using? What's the Wi-Fi connectivity like in these locations? Is the firewall blocking actually stream of these services? And those things you need an answer to, because although it may be down to the IT department locally, well, it's still your problem because your services isn't going to be getting in there. So really looking at that whole kind of end-to-end piece and really, really driving the adoption.
Brilliant. Sophie?
Working particularly across connected ecosystems where you've got multiple parties involved, I think it's really important to remember that selfish ambition is not a dirty word in that situation. People have to be there for a reason. So allowing people to explore their own profitability in being engaged in an initiative where you've got connected digital twins is important, as well as that strong focus on what is being delivered. Why have we all joined together? What is, to the point right at the beginning, what is that use case that is bringing us all together to achieve something of that nature? So it's having that balance, and that's a cultural thing, it's a social thing, and that's important to get right from the beginning.
Social and technical challenge.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Paul, we've got a great question for yourself here, is how do you manage conflict between the use of space? Is there a hierarchy of conflict resolution process in place?
Yeah, so that's kind of an ongoing kind of process. And remember, the actual owners are never the organising committee. So sometimes you're working in public spaces, sometimes you're working in kind of private venues, and then you've got 94 functional areas all battling for their space that they need to kind of run these things. But I think the best way to kind of describe how it then works is you've got to start with the athlete in the centre. The most important thing, you could strip everything away, but as long as there is a playing field for those athletes to compete on, that's the number one thing. Everything else from that then supports that. So it's all about kind of prioritization. But it all comes back to, why are we here? Well, the Olympic Games is there so people can compete against each other and have that kind of best opportunity, and then kind of build out. And then the next one, broadcast does have a big say because that's where the money is. That's where the sponsors want to be kind of seen. So again, it's about balancing those priorities.
Brilliant, thank you. And the screen's now come up so you can see the questions in the room as well. So the next question at the top here is Harry for yourself. It says, data access is often seen as a huge risk by data owners. How can data be made available to reuse whilst managing the concerns of those holding the data?
Yeah, that's a great question. And certainly, one of the ways to look at this is system boundaries. The smaller the system boundaries, and I started off life a long time ago in gas, and you could model one gas pipeline from A to B, and you only need to talk to 2 suppliers. As you zoom out, So the complexity increases, the risk increases, the value increases, but the system boundaries increase and the number of partners increase. And I think it's within the partnership, and you heard earlier from my colleague, Shell Eriksson, who's head of partnerships at DNV, is you've got to build a mutual trust. We spend all our time talking about trust, and no one entity can take a better position than the others. Otherwise, it will simply fall apart. So that trust, that mutual respect, have broad enough system boundaries. Yes, we probably spend more time in IP and T's and C's than we actually do on the digital twin, and that's part of the challenge, but you've got to respect each individual partner, build the consensus, have really good system boundaries, and have a really good risk framework.
Brilliant, thank you. And Sophie, one of our final questions for you, if I could please, is you talked about dynamic access to data, but surely the data alone is not enough to generate the what-if insights. What role did models play in your solution?
We enable models to be run as well, so you can actually create multiple twins if you wished of your assets. Some that you're revealing certain information through, some that are attached to genuine data sources. You might want to run synthetic data sources through some of those to understand that what-if scenario. And in the manufacturing environment, that's known as emulation twin versus simulation twin. And it's perfectly reasonable to want to run those two in symmetry so that you can do that kind of live risk mitigation strategy. So, yes, a perfectly reasonable thing to want to achieve as well.
Brilliant. So unfortunately, that's all the time we have for the questions now. A number more questions were asked that we haven't been able to get to, so our panellists will attempt to answer them either on the side or online afterwards. If you give a round of applause to our current set,